Welcome to my channel. Tonight, we'll take a quiet journey into the past, not to battlefields, palaces, or crowded marketplaces, but into the scented, slow-moving world of perfume in 18th century Paris. It was a city already alive with fragrances, both pleasant and unpleasant. The cobblestones smelled of horses, of damp stone, of crowded life. But behind the doors of small workshops, something very different was being created. A kind of alchemy was taking place where base ingredients like civet, musk, ambergris, vanilla, and wood were transformed by the skill of the perfumer into something refined, complex, and utterly seductive. Perfume in the 18th century was an intensely personal scent, something that identified you, set you apart from the masses. And some people took this idea to the extreme. One of our best sources for the smell of 18th century Paris is a perfumer named Jean-Baptiste Grenat, who kept detailed records of his creations. Born in 1725 in the village of Grasse, famed for its perfume industry, Grenat apprenticed with a local perfumer at age 14, and by age 30 had moved to Paris and set up his own shop. His books are filled with recipes for perfumes, named for mistresses and noblewomen whose likenesses he captured in a bottle. There was Madame de Pompadour, the king's mistress, and Mademoiselle de Lalanoue, a famous courtesan. One of Grenat's most famous creations was the perfume of the actress Mademoiselle Rosalie, a scent so popular it was copied by other perfumers. He recorded its ingredients, 12 in all, including lavender water, rose petals, musk, civet, ambergris, vanilla, and wood. All told, they would create a fragrance both floral and musky, light yet long-lasting. Perfumes like these were designed for the wealthy. For the commoners of 18th century Paris, there were simpler scents, often just a single flower like orange blossom or lavender. But even these had their uses. A scented handkerchief could be tucked into a sleeve to mask the smell of stale sweat and unwashed clothes. And while the wealthy might have dabbed perfume on their wrists and necks, the poor might have sprinkled scented water on their bodies to freshen up. Perfume was big business in the 18th century. In Paris alone, there were more than 600 perfumers. Most of them men, though women could own and run businesses. Some perfumers catered to the nobility, while others sold their wares in pharmacies or even fairs. By the middle of the century, however, the industry began to change. New shops called perfumeries opened, selling a wider range of products, including scented soaps, cosmetics, and hair care items. This new business model changed the way perfume was made. Mass production became more common, and some perfumers began to experiment with synthesizing scents, a practice that had been largely confined to far less savory enterprises, namely prostitutes. By the 18th century, the most expensive perfumes contained animal products like musk, which came from the musk deer, a small Asian antelope. Civet, or civet, came from the African civet cat, related to the mongoose. Both animals were prized for their musky secretions, which were collected by hunters or trappers and shipped to perfumers. Ambergris, another highly prized ingredient, was the waxy substance that sometimes washed up on the shores of France and other countries. It was initially thought to be the solidified oil from the whale's head, hence the name ambergris, which comes from the Greek word for both amber and whale. Today we know that ambergris is actually a substance that forms in the digestive system of sperm whales when they ingest large quantities of squid and fish. It has a salty marine odor that makes it particularly useful in masking other, less pleasant smells. As the 18th century drew to a close, the popularity of perfume began to fade, only to re-emerge again a half-century later. This was the world of the perfumer. To us, perfume may seem like an accessory, a luxury. But for Parisians of the 1700s, scent was a veil between themselves and the less pleasant odors of daily life. Perfume covered, disguised, and transformed. It was a mask, but also a status symbol. And for the men and women who produced it, life was quieter. It's more repetitive and far less glamorous than the sparkling glass bottles might suggest. Our story begins in 18th century Paris, a city that smelled well, like a city that had not yet invented deodorant. The streets were crowded with people, animals, and things. Refuse, the garbage would often pile up in the streets and stink. People's clothes smelled like their work. For example, bakers would smell like bread, and the cobbler's shop would smell like leather. Then there was the sewage, which often backed up into people's homes and made everything smell like stale waste. So if your house didn't smell like stale waste, it meant one of two things. You were rich, or you were lying. Because the wealthier you were, the less likely you were to have waste in your home. Because you could afford to hire someone to take your waste away. Perfume was a way to combat these smells. It was an olfactory barricade between you and the sewer, the animal pens, and the baker across the street. To put it in modern terms, it was the air freshener of the 1700s. But it was much more than that, because in a time before indoor plumbing, perfume was also used for personal hygiene. In other words, it was also the soap of the 1700s. They would use perfume to wash their hands and their clothes. They even used it to wash their hair. For centuries, the most popular scent was called eau de Rei, or old, and it was not very nice. Eau de Rei came from a flower that grew in swamps. It smelled like musk and was considered to be very sexy. Basically, the perfume was the original sign. You would put it on, and then all the other ladies and gentlemen would notice, and they would think, ew, you smell so good. What is that you're wearing? Then you would say, oh, it's my new bottle of old. And then they'd ask where you got it, and you would tell them the name of your favorite perfumer. And that's how the perfumer got his or her status. These days, we think of perfume as something feminine, but back then, it was very much a unisex product. Men wore it just as much as women did, and many of the biggest names in the perfume business were women. The biggest one was a woman named Marie Delhomme. She lived from 1697 to 1778, and she owned the most successful perfume shop in Paris. How successful? Well, at one point, she employed 400 people just to pick the flowers for her perfumes. And she sold so much perfume that she could sell a different scent every single day of the year. That's how rich she was. She was so rich, in fact, that she was able to buy a title. She became Madame la Marquise de Grimaud. And now, she could pass down her title to her children and grandchildren forever. But it was uneasy being Madame de Grimaud, because now she had to behave like a member of the French nobility. She had to go to parties. She had to schmooze people. She had to make sure she was always seen with a bottle of her perfume. It was a lot of pressure. And when she died, her granddaughter inherited the business. The next day, she went to the chemist and asked him to make her some perfume. And the chemist said, "I'm sorry, you're too late. Your grandmother was the only one who could commission me to make her perfume. Now you are nobody. Go home and start selling perfume out of a bathtub." That's how she lost the family business. What happened next? I don't know. I'm sorry. There's no historical record. But maybe she did go home and start selling perfume out of a bathtub. Maybe she had to make small batches of perfume in her kitchen. Maybe she had to travel to the swamp to pick the flowers herself. Maybe she had to start over from scratch. The thing is, that's what everyone thought perfume was like. This mysterious process that happened in a lab with a crazy old alchemist who would unteach anyone his secret recipe. The truth was far more simple and far less glamorous. It was just a businessman trying to make a living in Paris in the 18th century. That wasn't easy. So tonight we visit a perfumery on the outskirts of Paris. It's early morning. The sun is just rising, and the air is filled with the scent of jasmine and rose. Inside the glass containers, these flowers are gently boiling. This is the first step to creating perfume, but it takes more than flowers to make something special. There must also be a little bit of magic. It's hard work, this alchemy of scent. First, the flowers have to be picked at the right moment, neither too early nor too late. Then they must be treated with the utmost care. The perfumer must constantly test the mixture, adjust the balance of oils, sometimes adding a note of spice or wood. When the formula is just right, the scent will resonate with the wearer, expressing their unique personality and leaving a lasting impression on others. And if the recipe is a success, the perfumer will bottle it, label it, and send it out into the world, hoping that one day it might even find its way back to them, a message in a bottle from a secret admirer. But here in this little shop, there is no time for hopes or dreams. The flowers must be processed, the oils distilled, the alcohol evaporated. In this place, there is only work. The owner, a woman named Agnes, seems happy. Her shop may be small, but her ambitions are not. She wants to take her perfume to the very top, to the highest levels of luxury and elegance. But to do that, she needs a patron. someone who can introduce her creations to the elite. And she knows just the person, a famous actress who always smells divine. Enter Madame de Pompadour, a woman who could smell opportunity and used it to become the mistress of a king. Her influence over the royal court was unmatched, and she wasn't afraid to use it to get what she wanted. Whether it was money, power, or in this case, beautiful perfume. She became the toast of Paris, and everyone wanted a piece of the action. Artists painted her portrait. Poets wrote sonnets about her beauty. Perfumers formulated scents to capture her essence. Now, despite her many talents, Madame de Pompadour knew she wasn't the greatest beauty in the kingdom. That title belonged to the 19-year-old Marie Antoinette. But what the young queen lacked in charm, she made up for in fragrance. She smelled like orange blossom and gardenia, like the finest soaps and the softest linens. To the perfumers of Versailles, she was a walking advertisement, and they did everything they could to make sure that her scent lingered long after she passed by. One of those perfumers was Jean Faudet, a former valet who'd been promoted to the royal workshop at the age of 21. He was in charge of making sure that the queen smelled as sweet as the day she was born, and he took his job very seriously. Each morning he would bathe Marie Antoinette in a special concoction of essential oils, then dress her in clothes that had been soaked in even more perfume. Even the queen's wigs were stuffed with scented pomanders to make sure that her fragrance never faded. Today, we don't know exactly what these perfumes smelled like. Most of the ingredients have been lost to history. But some perfumers are trying to change that. Using old recipes and historical records, they're trying to recreate the scents of Versailles, hoping to capture the essence of a bygone era. One of the most popular is a rose scent called La Nuit de l'Homme Usable. It was created by a perfumer named Jerome Epinoy. Spent years researching the history of Versailles before coming up with his blend. The result is a complex, powdery rose that smells both nostalgic and utterly divine. As for Madame de Pompadour, she went on to enjoy a long and luxurious life. She had children, she played the harpsichord, and she continued to collect perfume until her death in 1764. But it was here in the parlor where Agnes's perfume would have been used. The year is 1775, and the room is filled with expensive woods, fine fabrics, and even finer company. A woman sits in a habac chair having her portrait painted. Her name is Madame de Montespan, and she is the mistress of a powerful king. Her rival, Madame de Pompadour, has just died, leaving a power vacuum that Montespan intends to fill. But to do that, she'll need help, and she knows just who to turn to, a famous perfumer whose scents are said to drive men wild. Now, the art of layering scents was an important part of dressing up in this era. The basics involved two key ingredients, powder and patchouli. First, the skin would be dusted with a fine powder, usually made from orris root or violet leaves. Then a few drops of patchouli oil would be added, along with a splash of water. The result was a light, airy fragrance that smelled both sweet and spicy. This was the perfect complement to the elaborate dresses of the time, which were made from layers of silk and lace. The scent would rise up from the fabric, mingling with the perfume and creating a truly unforgettable aroma. But the real magic happened when the ladies added a final touch, a necklace made of scented pearls. These were real pearls, of course, but they'd been treated with a special solution that made them smell like jasmine or orange blossom. When the lady in the painting smiled, the pearls would release their fragrance, adding a touch of sweetness to the overall aroma. And so, in the end, the scent of the parlor was more than just a collection of notes. It was a form of self-expression, a way for women to show off their status and their style. It was a symphony of smells that welcomed guests and made them feel like royalty, or at least that's how it smelled. Behind every great moment in history, there's a scent. The smell of wood smoke that carried the news of the Great Fire of London to the unsuspecting citizens. The sweet aroma of oranges that signaled the arrival of Christopher Columbus in the New World, or the heady perfume of jasmine that marked the night when Napoleon met his demise. Every age has its smells, its aromas that define it. And at the turn of the 20th century, amidst the political upheaval and social change, there was one fragrance that stood out, La Nuit de l'Homme Usable. You can smell it in the old photographs from that era, the leaders with their stiff collars and slicked back hair, the flappers dancing the Charleston, and the men smoking cigars while they conducted business deals that would change the world. They all smell of de l'Homme Usable. Now, this is not a story of war or turmoil. It is a story of fragrance, of slow labor, of bottles, herbs, and quiet influence. So let me transport you back to that bygone era. Let me introduce you to the world of de l'homme usable. Imagine yourself in a dim workshop, surrounded by dried flowers, oils, and glass vials. The world is busy outside, but here there is only the rhythm of careful work. A single bottle is being filled with a deep red liquid. Each drop is placed with the precision born of years of practice. The bottle is capped, sealed, and set aside. On the shelf next to it are hundreds of other bottles, each holding a different potion, each a testament to the art of perfumery. In this small workshop in the heart of Paris, a master perfumer is at work. His name is Paul Voiris, and he is one of the last of a dying breed. He is a nose, a creator of fragrances, and his latest work is unlike anything he has ever created before. It is bold, it is daring, and it is destined to become one of the most iconic scents of the 20th century. The year is 1922, and the world is on the cusp of a new era. The Great War has just ended, and people are looking for a new beginning. Paul's fragrance will be called de l'homme usable, and it will embody the spirit of this new age. But how does one create a fragrance that captures the essence of an entire era? It begins, as all things do, with an idea. Paul wants to create a scent that is both classic and modern. A fragrance that will appeal to the sophisticated tastes of the elite, while also being accessible to the masses. He experiments with different notes, trying to find the perfect combination of floral, woody, and spicy scents. Finally, he hits upon the perfect formula. It is a complex blend of over 20 ingredients, including bergamot, lavender, rose, patchouli, and vanilla. The result is a fragrance that is warm, inviting, and utterly unforgettable. The name de l'homme usable is chosen for its unique sound and its French origins. It is a name that will become synonymous with luxury and refinement. Paul's reputation grows, and soon he is creating fragrances for some of the most famous people in the world. Kings, queens, movie stars, and politicians all want to smell like de l'homme usable. The little workshop is transformed into a factory, and the once small batches of perfume become mass-produced. But despite the growing demand, Paul never compromises on quality. He remains dedicated to his craft, taking the time to perfect each and every fragrance. The years pass, and Paul's legacy lives on. Even after he retires, the de l'homme usable name remains synonymous with quality and refinement. Today, the brand continues to produce some of the world's most exquisite fragrances, each one a tribute to the art of perfumery. So the next time you smell a fragrance that takes you back in time, that evokes memories of a bygone era, know that you are experiencing a little bit of magic. Magic that began in a small workshop in the heart of Paris with a master perfumer and his dream of creating the perfect scent. The story of how de l'homme usable became a timeless classic. The air is thick with the smell of pipe tobacco and stale urine. I wrinkle my nose as I step over the threshold into M. Dubois's shop. Sunlight streams through the window, illuminating motes dancing in the stagnant air. Behind the counter, M. Dubois stirs a pot on a small stove, his back to me. I clear my throat and he turns, his face creased with age and lined with the memories of 1,000 scents. "Ah, Jean," he says, his voice raspy like old parchment. "You are early today." "I couldn't sleep, monsieur," I say, hoping he won't notice the tremor in my voice. I am only 16, an apprentice, but my head is already filled with perfumes. I dream of scents, of nothing else. He nods, understanding in his eyes. He too has been a young apprentice, dreaming of scents, I know. It shows in the way he straightens his shoulders ever so slightly, a tightening of the lines on his face, a ghost of a smile playing on his lips. "Then let us begin your lesson early," he says, his eyes twinkling. "Today we shall make perfume for the most beautiful woman in Paris." My heart pounds. To make perfume for the most beautiful woman in Paris is every perfumer's dream. I have read about her in the newspapers, Mademoiselle de Pompadour, the king's mistress. She has captivated the heart of King Louis XV, and by extension, the perfume-loving world. M. Dubois bustles about the shop, his movements surprisingly nimble for a man of his age. He pulls out a heavy bundle from under the counter and lays it on the table. My breath catches in my throat. It is the most beautiful bouquet of flowers I have ever seen. Roses, lilies, jasmine, all at the height of their fragrance, their petals unfurling like silk. I can barely believe that these flowers, so fresh and vibrant, will soon be perfume. Smiles, reading my thoughts. These flowers were picked at the stroke of dawn, he says, so that their dew is still upon the petals. This, my boy, is the secret of fine perfume, the marriage of flower and water. As I reach out to touch the flowers, he stops me with a hand on my shoulder. First, you must learn the names of each blossom, he says. Can you name this flower? I hesitate, my eyes searching the petals. Is this not a rose? A rose, he says, his voice grave. There are as many kinds of roses as there are women in Paris, each with a different scent, a different story. This, he says, holding up a rose with petals the color of dried blood, is a damask rose. Its scent is strong, its spirit passionate. Can you smell it, Jean? Inhale deeply. I close my eyes and breathe. Oh yes, I smell it. A deep, rich fragrance, unlike the light, airy scent of the common garden rose. Damask rose is a feast for the senses, its petals unfurling like velvet. He nods. And what is this flower here? Peer closer. These roses are smaller, their petals more delicate. Are these not roses, monsieur? They are roses, he says, but they are not from this world. Their scent is so faint, so elusive, yet so divine. Do you understand, Jean? Sometimes the rarest perfumes come from the most humble sources. I take a deep breath. Yes, I think I understand. He smiles then, and it transforms his face, making him younger, his eyes brighter. Now we shall begin, he says, and dips a spoon into the pot. We work in silence, the only sound the gentle bubbling of the stove. As the flowers release their fragrance into the oil, I feel a strange calm settle over me. I am just an apprentice, yet I am creating something beautiful, something that will soon adorn the person the king's mistress. When we are done, the sun is setting, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. Mi Dubois takes a small vial from the shelf and pours the perfume inside. It is the color of sunset, its surface sparkling like 1,000 stars. He hands it to me. Take this to Mademoiselle de Pompadour, he says. She awaits us at her home. I take the vial, my fingers trembling. I cannot believe that I, Jean, the perfumer's apprentice, will soon meet the most beautiful woman in Paris. You awaken before dawn in a small cottage on the edge of town. Your window is open, and the air is sweet with the scent of roses. Sunlight streams in, setting the motes dancing in the air. Beside you in bed, a half-empty bottle of sleeping draught and a closed book. The work ahead of you endless. You throw back the covers and get to your feet. It's going to be a busy day. First, you must sort through the day's delivery of petals and leaves. Roses, lavender, orange blossom, if you are fortunate, sometimes even exotic spices brought by merchants from distant ports. The work is slow, and every stem must be inspected. The blossoms are bruised from transport, some beginning to wilt. You strip away what cannot be used: bruised petals, brown leaves, stems too thick or too thin. What remains is set aside to dry. Some blossoms will be ready to use immediately, but most must wait until their moisture is gone. Even the finest perfumes cannot overcome the cloying sweetness of overripe flowers. Patience is as important as any other quality for one in your profession. You wash your hands in the basin beside your bed, then tie back your hair, securing it with a silk scarf. Today's deliveries include rose hips and lavender buds. Rose is the most popular scent in the kingdom, so there is always demand for rose products. Lavender is second, and orange blossom is prized by the nobility, but is rarely ordered. Occasionally you will get something truly exotic, like cinnamon leaves from the south, or even crushed beetles for making ink. Today is not one of those days. Your shop is small, but all the tools of your trade are here. Scissors, knives, mortars and pestles, scales, bottles, and vials of all shapes and sizes, funnels, cloths, and paper. Girdled around your waist is a leather apron, its pockets stuffed with dried flowers, each kind carefully labeled. From the depths of one pocket, you produce a small vial filled with a tarry substance. It's almost black in the dim light, but in the sun, it shimmers green. This is dragon's breath, the resin from crushed dragon eggs. Its fumes are said to drive away evil spirits. No one knows for certain where it comes from, only that it is very expensive and very potent. A little goes a long way. A customer enters, interrupting your thoughts. A young man, handsome in a dashing, careless sort of way. He is dressed in fine clothes. Though his boots are scuffed and his doublet unbuttoned, he holds up a crumpled piece of paper. "I have an order for you," he says, handing it to you. Taking the list, you smooth out the creases. "Ah, another perfume," you say, more to yourself than to him. The young man straightens, his eyes wide. "Something wrong?" he asks. "No, of course not," you reply. You know this particular order well. It's one of the more interesting ones. The list includes several ingredients you have in stock, plus a few special requests. At the bottom of the page is the name of the shop where the finished product is to be delivered. You fold the list carefully and tuck it into your apron. The work ahead of you is both delicate and dangerous. Each ingredient must be measured precisely. Too much of a strong ingredient can ruin the entire batch. Sometimes you must steep flowers in vinegar or alcohol. Other times you must bruise the ingredients, crushing them to release their oils. Still other ingredients demand to be treated with heat. Overripe fruit and resins must be melted down and strained. Throughout the day, you work, lost in the endless cycle of measuring, pouring, stirring, waiting, drying, grinding, mixing, and blending. As the day progresses, more customers arrive, some nobles who insist on being waited on hand and foot, others who are just as eager to learn the secrets of your craft. One elderly woman lingers near the door, her gnarled fingers twisted in her shawl. She doesn't buy anything, but you see her every day. And though you don't speak, you know she's lonely. When the shop is empty, you sometimes talk to her, sharing stories of faraway places and the people you've met on your travels. She listens patiently, her cloudy eyes unfocused. Then when the time comes for her to leave, she shuffles away without a word. As the hours pass, the scent of your wares fills the shop. Rose, lavender, citrus, spice, and wood smoke mingle with the sweet, cloying aroma of overripe fruit. Soon, it will be time to start over, to begin the slow process of separating the good from the bad. As the sun begins its slow journey toward the horizon, the sky outside your window blazes with crimson and gold. The air grows still. Fatigue weighs upon you, but you continue to work, knowing that soon you will be through. This is a story about a young apprentice who learns how to make perfume. Soon, the small workshop is filled with heat. A copper pan sits over the fire. Water bubbles softly, and the first flowers are placed in. Steam rises, carrying their delicate essence into the air. The smell is faint, almost too light to grasp, but it builds layer by layer as the boiling continues. Your master checks the mixture. He stirs with a wooden paddle, patient and precise, watching the oils rise to the surface. This is enfleurage and distillation, though no one calls it chemistry yet. It is repetition, trial and error. You are an apprentice at a famous perfume house. You learn by watching, by smelling, by feeling the flowers between your fingers, and by listening to your master talk about perfume. He tells you stories of faraway places where the flowers are grown and stories of the people who wear the scent. Each perfume has a story, and each story has a scent. You will come to know them all. For now, you are to prepare the flowers for the day's distillation. First, the petals. Only the finest petals are used, the ones that are fully open, the ones that are not bruised or damaged. You remember your master's words? The petal is the heart of the flower. It holds the essence of the plant, its soul. As you work, you think about the different types of petals, the velvety ones like roses, and irises, the waxy ones like gardenias and hyacinths, and the thin papery ones like jasmine and lilac. Each type requires a different touch, a different level of care. You must be gentle but firm, slow but steady. You must feel the petal, understand its nature, and treat it accordingly. Next, the leaves. Some leaves are used, the ones that are fresh and green, the ones that are not wilted or dried out. You dip the leaves in cool water and let them rest on a rack to drain. You remember your master's words? The leaf is the breath of the plant, carries the energy of the earth, its vitality. As you work, you think about the different types of leaves, the thick and fleshy ones like bay leaves and mint leaves, the thin and brittle. Ones like sage leaves and lavender leaves, and the hairy and aromatic ones like rosemary and thyme leaves. Each type requires a different touch, a different level of care. You must be gentle, but firm, slow, but steady. You must feel the leaf, understand its nature, and treat it accordingly. Finally, the woods. Some woods are used, the ones that are dry and well-seasoned, the ones that are not damp or rotten. You cut the wood into small pieces and place them in a bowl. You remember your master's words. The wood is the strength of the plant. It anchors the fragrance, gives it depth and character. As you work, you think about the different types of wood. The light and airy ones like cedarwood and sandalwood, the dark and heavy ones like oud and argarwood, and the sweet and spicy ones like cinnamon and cassia. Each type requires a different touch, a different level of care. You must be gentle but firm, slow but steady. You must feel the wood, understand its nature, and treat it accordingly. The petals, the leaves, and the woods are ready. Soon, they will be transformed into perfume. You take a deep breath and smile. You are part of something bigger than yourself. You are part of a tradition, a craft, an art form. You are a perfumer. The morning mist still hangs in the air, clinging to the trees that line the cobblestone streets. It's a new day, a blank page, and the possibilities are endless. You've come to a renowned perfume house, nestled in the heart of a historic city. It's a place where tradition meets innovation, where the past whispers secrets to the future. As the sun ascends higher in the sky, casting its golden rays through the large windows, your day begins. First, the heavy glass vials must be washed. The rims are narrow and fragile, and each one must be cleaned of the residue from yesterday's experiments. Glass is cool and slippery between your fingers. When the sunlight strikes it just right, faint rainbows scatter on the workshop's walls. Today is a big one. You're helping create a scent for the next generation. After the vials are clean and dry, the oils arrive. Each bottle is like a tiny treasure chest, holding the essence of flowers, woods, and spices from around the world. Your task is to measure them out, drop by drop, into the vials. The perfumer, a man with eyes as deep and mysterious as the scent he creates, watches you closely. His movements are slow and precise as he guides your hand, teaching you the art of blending. You begin with a base note, a grounding force that anchors the fragrance. Cedarwood, atlas, a rich, woody scent, is added first, a few drops at a time. The perfumer nods, his eyes twinkling. You continue, measuring out vetiver, Haitian, a smoky, earthy aroma that adds depth and complexity. The oils mingle and swirl, their colors merging like a painter's palette. Each drop is a brushstroke on the canvas of the scent, building layers of fragrance. Then comes the heart, the emotional core of the perfume. Jasmine, sambac, with its heady, sweet floral scent, is added next, followed by rose de mai, whose petals unfurl a powdery, romantic aroma. The perfumer hums softly, a tuneless melody that speaks of centuries-old traditions. He stops, closes his eyes, and inhales deeply. You do the same, trying to decipher the symphony of scents in this liquid poetry, but something's missing. The perfect fragrance is like a well-crafted story. It needs a captivating beginning, a memorable ending. For this one, the perfumer decides on citrus top notes, sparkling and vibrant. Grapefruit, pink, a burst of freshness. Mandarin, orange, a touch of sweetness, and nerly orange blossom, a hint of bitter almond. The oils blend and the fragrance takes flight. It's time to test the potion, as they call it. One spritz on the test strip, and the fragrance unfolds. Top notes dance on your skin, a lively introduction that entices the senses. Citrus mingles with the earthy undertones, creating a harmonious blend. In the distance, a hint of spice lingers, promising intrigue. The perfumer nods, his face a mask of concentration. He makes a few adjustments, adding a touch more of vetiver and a whisper of rose. You watch intently, eager to capture the nuances of his expertise. And then, as if by magic, the perfect balance is achieved. The fragrance now rests, patiently waiting for its moment to captivate the world. But the journey doesn't end here. Now begins the art of naming, of giving this olfactory masterpiece a form. The perfumer paces, lost in thought. Finally, he turns, a spark in his eye. Terracotta, he announces. The name rolls off his tongue and you feel its weight, its earthiness, its rustic charm. Suits the fragrance, its connection to the land, its natural, earthy aroma. As the day draws to a close, the terracotta scent lingers in the air, a testament to the day's work. The workshop is quiet now, The alchemy of scent settled for the night. The stars are out, and you, with your newfound knowledge and a heart full of gratitude, step out into the cool evening air. Sunlight streams through the open window, illuminating motes dancing in the air. It falls across a cluttered workbench, illuminating a quill pen scratching on a piece of parchment. The pen scratches and scratches until the tip breaks off, leaving ink staining the wood. The writer sighs and dips another quill into an ink bottle. He is an apothecary, a preparer of medicines. He makes no great claim to his skill. His shop is small and unassuming, tucked away on a quiet street in a city. He is just one of many purveyors of health elixirs and tonics. But what he lacks in reputation, he makes up for in quality. His medicines are some of the best in the city, sought after by those who know of their efficacy. But making good medicine takes time, and he has more orders than he can fill. So he works. Sunlight climbs higher, then begins its slow journey down. Outside, the noise of the street below rises as carts and horses clatter past. Here in the quiet of the workshop, the only sounds are the low bubbling of pans on the stove and the scratching of his pen. The scent of boiling herbs fills the air, mingling with the smell of ink and parchment. He writes labels for his wares, each one a simple design, just the name of the mixture inside. Sometimes the ink smudges, and he must begin again. The hours pass slowly. He writes and writes until his hand cramps. Then he sets the label down and reaches for a different bottle. Each one he fills is checked and double-checked. Each ingredient must be measured perfectly, each mixture matched to its order. Outside, the day is nearly done. The light fades, the sounds of the street grow distant. In the corner, a cat curls up, purring softly. He continues his work until every order is filled and every bottle is labeled. Then he cleans his hands and prepares to lock up. As he does, he hears a cough from the corner. The cat has fallen asleep, but now it coughs, a harsh hacking sound that shakes its small body. He walks over and picks the cat up. It is warm to the touch, and its eyes are closed. He doesn't know if it is sick or simply tired. Either way, he thinks it needs a tonic. He goes to his shelf and picks out a small bottle. Inside, a red liquid sparkles. It is one of his most popular mixtures, a cure for coughs and colds. He uncorks the bottle and puts a few drops on the cat's paws. It laps them up, then begins to purr again. The coughing is gone. He smiles, feeling the day's tiredness pull at him. He, too, could use a bit of that tonic. He pours himself a small amount into a mug and drinks it down. It is bitter, but the warmth spreads through him, chasing away the chill of the evening. He blows out the candles on his workbench, plunging the room into darkness. The cat curls up on a rug and he joins it, closing his eyes. As sleep takes him, he dreams of herbs and ink, of labels and lit candles, of cats and quiet streets. The sounds of the city fade away, replaced by the quiet bubbling of pans, the faint scratching of a pen, and the persistent fragrance of herbs. The old man has gone home for the night. His granddaughter watches you from the corner, her eyes shining with curiosity and maybe a little mischief. The empty bottles on the table seem to be daring you. What will you do next? You are the apprentice, the new arrival in the small shop. In a few days you will start your training, but for now, the city smells of rain and possibility. If this is your first time here, welcome to our channel, where we tell stories through scent. Today we are exploring the history of perfume. Ready? Let's begin. By evening, the work is not done. The perfumer checks the progress of a tincture left for days in a sealed jar. He swirls it gently, examines the color, and inhales the aroma. It is not ready. It may need another week, or perhaps 2. Patience is everything. And so the day ends much as it began. With flowers, with oils, with the slow, careful labor of turning the fleeting essence of nature into something lasting. For you, the apprentice, your hands smell faintly of lavender and rose, but also of smoke, ink, and sweat. It is not glamorous. It is not effortless. But in the quiet rhythm of the perfumer's workshop, you can sense the beginnings of something enduring. Over the next few weeks, you will learn that this work is older than recorded history itself. Perfumes have been found in Egyptian tombs dating back 4,000 years. You will see how the ancient Greeks distilled fragrant oils from flowers and herbs, creating perfumes that were prized throughout the Roman Empire. You will learn about the mysterious unguents of the Middle East, the incense of Arabia, the floral waters of the Ottoman Empire. Each culture had its own traditions, its own techniques, its own language of fragrance. But you will also discover that despite their seemingly endless variety, all perfumes follow the same basic principles. You learn this from the old master himself. His wrinkled hands move with a practiced grace as he measures out the ingredients for a new perfume. First, the base notes, anchoring the fragrance with their depth and warmth. Then the middle notes, adding their unique character and complexity. Finally, the top notes, dancing on the surface like sparks on water. The three parts come together in perfect harmony, creating something that is greater than the sum of its parts. This is the heart and soul of perfumery, the art and science of blending raw materials into a finished fragrance. Your days are long and filled with tasks. Sometimes you help the perfumer by gathering ingredients, measuring them out, mixing them together with a long wooden spoon. At other times, you are sent to the apothecary to pick up supplies. On some days, you get to accompany the perfumer on his rounds to see clients. They come from all walks of life, nobles and paupers alike, each with their own unique scent and story. Some want to cover up unpleasant odors. Others want to enhance their natural fragrance. Some seek to attract the attention of potential suitors, while others simply want to smell good. Whatever their reasons, they all leave the shop with a smile on their face and a vial of perfume in their hand. As the weeks turn into months, you begin to feel like an integral part of the team. You are no longer just the apprentice. You are becoming a perfumer yourself. Your nose becomes more attuned to the subtlest of scents. You can distinguish between different types of vanilla, for example, or pick out the individual notes of a complex fragrance. You even develop your own style, your own way of blending fragrances. People start to take notice. Customers ask for your creations by name. The perfumer smiles with pride. He sees in you the potential to become something great. But the city still smells of rain and possibility. And deep down you know that what you have learned here is only the beginning. To truly master perfumery, you need to explore the world. So one day you pack your bags and set off to see the world. For centuries, the trade of perfume was a closely guarded secret, passed down from father to son or master to apprentice. But slowly, very slowly, things are changing. Competition is growing in Europe, and the old ways are being questioned. New ideas are emerging, and soon the rules will be broken. In the bustling streets of London, you meet a chemist who is experimenting with synthetic materials. Back in Paris, you discover a trail of deception and intrigue that leads to the perfumery of a rival. In Florence, you encounter a botanist who is obsessed with the secrets of plants. All these characters and many more will play a role in the story of modern perfumery. You will learn that the quest for new ingredients takes perfumers to far-off lands, exotic locales that were previously unknown to Europeans. You will see how the discovery of new materials transforms the world of perfumery forever. Along the way, you will encounter all sorts of obstacles. There are rival perfumers who will try to steal your secrets. There are natural disasters that will wipe out entire crops of fragrant materials. There are even wars that will disrupt the supply of essential ingredients. But you will overcome these challenges and emerge victorious. You will return to Paris a master perfumer, ready to take your place among the greats. But the city smells different now. The old ways are gone, and a new era is dawning. You must decide whether to embrace the future or cling to the past. Will you stay true to the traditions of French perfumery, or will you blaze a new trail? Maybe you choose to combine tradition and modernity, creating a unique style that is all your own, and so you find yourself at the center of a revolution. The world of perfume is changing, and you must adapt in order to survive. But change can be a good thing. It can lead to innovation, to creativity, to growth. Under your leadership, the little shop will grow into a world-renowned perfumery. People will come from all over the world to experience your fragrances. And it all started with a dream, a passion for perfume, and the courage to follow your dreams. As the sun sets over Paris, you stand at the window of your shop, watching the city lights twinkle to life. In the distance, you can hear the faint strains of music and the sound of laughter. It has been a long journey, but you have finally made it. With your own perfumery up and running, you take a moment to appreciate how far you have come. You remember the long hours spent learning the trade, the countless mistakes made along the way, the sacrifices that had to be made to make your dream a reality. But none of that matters now, because you have achieved your goal. You are a successful perfumer. As you look around your shop, you see the fruits of your labor everywhere. The shelves are lined with bottles of your finest fragrances, each one a testament to your skill and artistry. The walls are adorned with awards and accolades that you have received from your peers and customers alike. But what makes you the most proud is not the success or the recognition, but the passion that you have for your craft. Every time you create a new fragrance, you pour your heart and soul into it. You take great pleasure in the process, from blending the ingredients to the finished product. Looking back on your journey, you realize that it was all worth it. The long hours, the hard work, and the sacrifices made have paid off. You have created something special, something that brings joy to people's lives. As you close up shop for the night, you take one last look around. The shop is empty now, but in your mind's eye, you can see the faces of your customers, the smiles on their lips, and the compliments they have paid you. That is why you do what you do, to bring a smile to people's faces and to create memories that will last a lifetime. And so you continue on, driven by your passion for fragrance, knowing that each new day brings new opportunities to create, to innovate, and to bring joy to the world through your art. This is Versailles. It's what it smelled like in 1742. Ah, now hold on, you material girls. I know what you're thinking. Where are the fancy ingredients? The eau de Janeiro, the civet, the ambergris. Well, they're here, but they're hiding in plain sight. Because to understand what perfumes smelled like in the 18th century, we must step out of the workshop and into the gilded halls of Versailles. Here, perfume was not just a pleasant accessory. It was woven into the very fabric of politics, power, and influence. And no one embodied this more completely than Jean Antoinette Poisson, better known as Madame de Pompadour. Her story is one of those rare tales where fact is truly stranger than fiction. Born out of wedlock in 1724, she was the illegitimate daughter of a wealthy family, and by all accounts, not particularly pretty. Yet at the age of 19, she became the mistress of the most powerful man in the world, King Louis II. He was 62 years old and had been balding since he was in his 20s. So young, Madame de Pompadour got a double crown jewel status, both literally and metaphorically. She had 2 palaces built for her by the king, one in Paris and one in Versailles, right next door to the royal palace. And there she lived with her 2 greatest luxuries, her 2 dogs, a bitchin' fraise named Boy, and a poodle named Fanchon, and of course her perfume. Now, our sources tell us that her perfume was extremely cloying, so much so that some accounts say the smell alone would give one a headache. But that is not really surprising when you consider that the main note was a literal headache in a bottle, Petit Maid de Noix or Little Night Blooming. Jasmine, you heard me right, Jasmine. The plant itself doesn't have much of a scent, but the oil extracted from its pollen does, and it smells like, well, nothing so much as a migraine. But why would Madame de Pompadour cover herself in headaches? Well, back then, the more powerful the medicine, the more side effects it had. And there was no more powerful medicine than the court of Versailles. So while today, we might think of perfume as something light and airy, something to enhance our natural scent, in the 18th century, it was a whole other ballgame. Literally, the point was to cover up everything, your natural scent, your sweat, the musk of unwashed bodies, stale urine, even the stench of disease. And what better way to climb the social rungs than with a cloying, expensive perfume that announced to the world, I am here and I am fabulous. Even if you couldn't see her, you would know when Madame de Pompadour entered a room. What's more, she took full advantage of this olfactory weapon. She dosed her enemies with migraine-inducing perfume until literally the end of her life. When she died, the poor, underpaid royal servants had to empty her perfume bottles down the drain, no doubt suffering through one hell of a stench. So what did this perfume actually smell like? Well, here's what we do know. It was extremely floral, so much so that people could identify individual flowers within the bouquet. and the main note was undoubtedly jasmine, a flower associated with female sexuality since antiquity. In the Middle Ages, women would wear jasmine to cover up the musk of their menstrual cycle. And even today, many perfumes that feature jasmine as a main note are marketed towards women. In fact, that association is so strong that during World War II, GIs were actually issued perfume with a non-floral scent to help them tell who was a lady and who was a dude disguised as a lady. Other notes in Madame de Pompadour's perfume included orange blossom, which has a sweet citrusy scent reminiscent of fresh orange blossom water, rose, of course, because it's the 18th century, and rose is the queen of flowers, and finally, a dash of spice to keep things interesting. Interestingly enough, the plants themselves may not have been particularly fragrant. Instead, the perfume was likely scented with essential oils distilled from these flowers. That is because the absolute or pure perfume would have been far too expensive for even a wealthy noblewoman like Madame de Pompadour. It was reserved only for the most elite of French society, made up of 2% of the population, and called the Parfum de la Cour, or the court perfume. These nobles were the only ones allowed to wear perfume in public, and if you weren't one of the chosen few, you would likely have smelled them coming long before you saw them. Perfume was essentially an olfactory class system, and the higher up you climbed, the more expensive and more pungent your fragrance became. But it wasn't just about creating a cloying concoction that announced your wealth. For Madame de Pompadour, it was also a way to brand herself, to make sure everyone knew who was boss. After all, when you smell something delicious wafting through the palace halls, what's the first thing you want to do? Find the source. And when you finally lay eyes on the beautiful woman in the finest clothes, do you know what else you see? Her perfume. Madame de Montespan, mistress of Louis XV, had everything a woman could want in the 17th century. Wealth, power, and most importantly, the heart of the most eligible bachelor in all of Europe. Her story is one of ambition, seduction, and survival in a world where women were valued for their beauty and nothing more. But how did a woman of low birth become the king's mistress? What was her secret? Let's find out. Jeanne de la Motte Valois was not born into nobility. Her father, Jean de la Motte, was a middle-class lawyer, while her mother, Suzanne, was the daughter of a bourgeois family. Despite her humble beginnings, Jeanne received a good education, which was not typical for girls of her social status. She learned Latin, Greek, and philosophy, as well as the arts of seduction and intrigue. When she was 19, her mother died and her father married one of his colleagues, a wealthy widow with 2 daughters. This new stepmother was a scheming woman who wanted the best for her daughters and saw the potential in her stepdaughter. She recognized that Jeanne was beautiful and knew how to use her beauty to her advantage. The stepmother took her under her wing and began to teach her the ways of the world, how to dress, how to behave, and how to make powerful enemies and friends. Together, they would attend parties and social events where Jeanne would meet important people and learn the art of conversation. One day, Jeanne caught the eye of the Sun King, Louis XV. He was only 15 at the time, but he was already known for his womanizing ways. He had many mistresses before he met Jeanne, but none of them could hold his interest for long. But Jeanne was different. She was intelligent and witty, and she knew how to keep the young king entertained. She would read him poetry, play games with him, and even engage in intellectual discussions. Unlike other women who fawned over him, Jeanne was not afraid to speak her mind or to challenge his ideas. This intrigued the king even more, and he became infatuated with her. The problem was that the king's mother, Queen Marie Mancini, did not approve of Jeanne. She was a Borgia, a member of one of the oldest and most influential families in France, and she wanted her son to marry a suitable noblewoman. She had already chosen a bride for him, but Louis was not interested in any of these women. He only had eyes for Joan. The king was head over heels in love and showered her with expensive gifts, jewelry, clothing, and perfume. He also built her a magnificent apartment in the Palace of Versailles, where she would live with her daughter, Mademoiselle de Blois, whom he had acknowledged and given a noble title. But the king's mother never changed her mind about Jeanne, and so the couple had to keep their relationship a secret. This was not easy, as the king was often at court and surrounded by people who disapproved of Jeanne. But she was clever and resourceful, and she managed to keep their affair hidden for several years. Eventually, the king's mother died, and in 1661, Louis and Jeanne were finally able to make their relationship public. Jean was now the most powerful woman in France, but she had to be careful not to abuse her power. She knew that she was not a member of the French nobility, and she was careful to avoid doing anything that would scandalize the court. She dressed modestly, she behaved properly, and she never flaunted her power. Despite the envy and resentment of many of the nobles, she managed to make powerful enemies and secure her position at court. In 1667, she gave birth to another child, the future regent Philippe II, Duke of Orleans. And although she was never officially married to the king, she was considered his legitimate wife by all but name. She continued to exercise great influence over him until his death in 1715, and she outlived him by only 2 months. Although she had no noble title, she was buried next to him in the royal vault at the Basilica of St. Denis. Her story is a reminder that beauty and intelligence are powerful tools, and that anyone, regardless of their social status, can achieve greatness if they have the courage and wit to pursue their goals. Versailles was a palace of beauty and display, but it was also crowded, overheated, and filled with odors that we today might find overwhelming. The air was thick with the stench of stale urine, the perfume of stale sweat, now the constant aroma of food being prepared in the royal kitchens permeated throughout the entire palace. Even the king's famous mistresses were often tainted by these smells. So to be noticed by the Sun King, one had to employ every tactic at their disposal to stand out amongst the crowd. And for many of the ladies at Versailles, that meant covering up the less savory aromas with an alluring fragrance. It is said that when Louis XIV's mistress, the Marquise de Montespan, arrived at the Palace of Versailles, she caused quite a stir. Not only was she strikingly beautiful, but she also smelled divine. Her perfume, a secret concoction that she refused to share, became her signature. And as she moved through the palace, it was said that her scent lingered in the air like a memory. But there was another lady at the court of Versailles whose perfume was equally famous, though for a different reason. Her name was Madame de Pompadour, and she too had a signature scent, one that became synonymous with her very being. And although hers was not the most expensive or the rarest fragrance, it was her choice of scent that set her apart from the rest. For while other women at Versailles were using perfume as a mere covering, Madame de Pompadour was using it as a weapon, a silent, combustible weapon that could cut through the noise and the crowds and reach the heart of the Sun King. Unlike the Marquise de Montespan, you know exactly what Madame de Pompadour smelled like. That's because she chose to bottle her essence, so to speak, and leave behind a legacy of fragrance that has endured for centuries. Her perfume was a simple yet elegant blend of 3 notes: roses, amber, and orange blossom. It was a scent that was both familiar and comforting, yet also exotic and exciting. It was a scent that spoke of luxury and refinement, but also of warmth and sensuality. To understand why this perfume was so effective, we have to understand the context in which it was used. Versailles was a world of etiquette and tradition, a place where everything was carefully planned and controlled. The Sun King ruled over his court with an iron fist, and the slightest misstep could have disastrous consequences. In this environment, it was essential to project an image of perfection, to be always on display. And perfume was the perfect tool for this. For Madame de Pompadour, scent was never frivolous. It was a language once spoken in roses, amber, and orange blossom. Each time she entered a room, her perfume would announce her arrival, carrying with it the message of her femininity, her elegance, and her desirability. It was a subtle reminder of her presence, a way of ensuring that she would not be overlooked or ignored. And it worked. The Sun King took notice of this new mistress, not just because of her looks or her status, but because of her smell. Her perfume was like a secret weapon, one that helped her to win the heart of the most powerful man in France. But it wasn't just the king who took notice of Madame de Pompadour's perfume. Soon, every woman at Versailles was wearing roses, amber and orange blossom, trying to capture the same elusive scent that had captivated the Sun King. But no one could do it. Perfume was too personal, too connected to Madame de Pompadour herself. No matter how hard they tried, no one could smell like her. So what is the lesson to be learned here? Perhaps it is that scent is more than just a personal preference. It is a form of identity. Our perfumes tell people who we are, even if we don't know it ourselves. Or perhaps it is simply a reminder to never underestimate the power of a good fragrance. After all, it was a simple perfume that helped Madame de Pompadour to rise to the heights of power and influence. A perfume that today we can still smell and marvel at its simplicity and its elegance. When it comes to matters of love, we all long for that special something, don't we? Something that sets our hearts aflutter, that makes us feel like we're walking on air. For some, it's the art of giving a perfect gift. For others, it's the thrill of a surprise, a grand gesture that sweeps us off our feet. But have you ever stopped to wonder about the subtle, almost imperceptible things that can make us fall head over heels? The not-so-grand gestures that speak volumes about the depth of someone's feelings? Today, let's explore one such thing. A story about a woman who won hearts with the most subtle of gestures, her secret, an aroma that whispered of love. In the grand tapestry of life, there are moments, however small, that become monumental in their impact on our hearts. And this story is one such moment. Our tale revolves around a woman who was renowned for her impeccable taste and refined sensibilities. Among the many things she favored, two stood out: delicate floral fragrances and a particular brand of perfume. Now, you might be wondering what's so extraordinary about that. After all, perfume is a common thing, isn't it? Not when it comes to her. For her, choosing a perfume was no ordinary task. It was an art form. She had a particular fondness for light, airy florals that never failed to uplift her spirits. Her collection was a treasure trove of scents from hyacinth to lilac, each bottle holding a unique memory, a special place in her heart. But there was one fragrance that held a special place in her olfactory trove, a perfume that became synonymous with her very essence. Interestingly, she wasn't particularly fond of strong, overpowering scents. For her, subtlety was the ultimate seduction. That's why she preferred a delicate floral fragrance, carefully chosen to complement her presence without overpowering it. This choice wasn't just about personal preference. It was a reflection of her deep understanding of the world around her. She knew that the true essence of elegance lay in the finer details, the understated, the almost imperceptible. As the story goes, visitors to her apartments often remarked about the faint, sweet scent that seemed to linger in the air long after she had left the room. This wasn't merely a figment of their imagination. It was a testament to her unique charm, a sensory experience that added another layer to her enigmatic allure. Her friends and acquaintances came to associate this subtle fragrance with her. Much like the way one associates a particular song with a cherished memory or a beloved book with a rainy afternoon, it became a part of her public image, a subtle yet significant detail that set her apart. This little thing, this small choice she made every day, became a defining feature of her personality, and why not? After all, it was an expression of her unique self, a silent ambassador of her spirit. In a world where first impressions matter and reputations are made and broken at the drop of a hat, such subtle gestures speak volumes. They tell the world about the kind of person you are, someone who pays attention to detail, someone who values the finer things in life, someone who understands the power of subtlety. As society evolved and trends ebbed and flowed, her choice remained constant, a beacon of her enduring taste and elegance. It was a quiet rebellion against the loud, the brash, and the overpowering, a statement in itself. As time went by, this seemingly insignificant habit of hers took on a life of its own. It became a topic of conversation in social circles, a talking point among admirers. People would enter her apartments not just to see her, but also to experience the aroma that was so uniquely her. It added a layer of intrigue to her persona, making her all the more fascinating, all the more desirable. Now you might be wondering, what's the big deal about a perfume? Isn't it just a scent? Well, yes, it is just a scent. But for her, it represented so much more. It was a tribute to her femininity, a celebration of her individuality, an ode to her unique charm. It was a part of her love language, a silent declaration of the passion she held for life, for beauty, for everything that made her human. So the next time you find yourself falling in love, look beyond the grand gestures and sweeping romances. Sometimes love whispers in the most subtle ways. It caresses your senses. It dances in your memory. And sometimes it lingers in the air, long after you've breathed it in. A delicate floral fragrance that speaks of love. Because in the grand scheme of things, isn't that what love is all about? The little things, the subtle touches, the moments that make life worth living. All right, now we're getting somewhere. In 2008, Carla Bruni was named the most elegant woman in the world by the editors of Harper's Bazaar magazine. Carla Bruni, former supermodel, and at the time, First Lady of France. Now, I've said this before, but it bears repeating that perfume is a silly thing, frivolous, even narcissistic. The scent you wear is a secret signal to the people around you, an attempt to impress others, possibly even yourself. In other words, it's a status symbol. So who better to become the unofficial Minister of Culture of France than Carla Bruni, whose whole brand was being cultivated and classy. She understood how to use perfume to further her political career, to present herself as refined, controlled, elevated above the gossip that swirled around her. And boy, did the gossip swirl when she became First Lady. The press fixated on her every move, every dress, every handbag, every scent. They analyzed the messages behind these choices, dissecting them like some kind of perfuming-fused Rosetta Stone. Was this new fragrance an attempt to appear more natural? Was that dress a veiled reference to her rural upbringing? What did this handbag say about her political leanings? The thing is, Carla didn't care. She knew exactly what she was doing. Cultivating this image of mystery and allure was part of her charm offensive. She wanted to be seen as someone who didn't have to explain herself, who didn't need to defend her choices. Her silence became a weapon against the gossips. The more they speculated, the more she withdrew into herself, becoming even more enigmatic, even more alluring. When you think about it, this is a brilliant strategy. By refusing to play their game, she won. She became the ultimate prize, the unattainable ideal, the perfectly cultivated woman who didn't need to prove herself to anyone. And then there's the perfume La Nuit, de l'Homme Usable. It's a woody, musky scent with notes of amber and vanilla. It was launched in 2013 as part of their Les Extraits collection. But it wasn't just any bottle. No, it was presented in a flagon designed by artist Bertrand Levier, a sort of trompe l'oeil, a trick of the eye. That a bottle looks like a generic cleaning product, like something you might find under the sink. But it's not. It's a perfume, a subtle reminder that appearances can be deceiving. So why did Carla choose this scent? Well, it's hard to say. Perfumes are such a personal thing. They evoke memories, trigger emotions, transport us to another time or place. But this one, with its unexpected twist, its subversion of expectations, seems to fit Carla quite well. Like the scent itself, she defies easy categorization. She's not just a supermodel or a singer or a politician's wife. She's all of those things and more. A cultural icon, a style icon. A woman who refuses to be defined by anyone else's expectations. As the wife of a president, she could have easily slipped into the background, becoming just another political spouse. But Carla never did that. She used her platform to promote French culture, to support artists and intellectuals, to champion causes she believed in. She was, in many ways, France's unofficial Minister of Culture, a role she played with wit and intelligence and style. When she wore de l'Homme Usable, she wasn't just making a fashion statement. She was sending a message to the world, to the press, to anyone who dared to underestimate her. Don't be fooled by appearances. Look beyond the surface and you'll find a woman who is anything but ordinary. A woman who doesn't need to explain herself because her actions speak louder than words. A woman who doesn't need to defend her choices because they're re-driven by a deep sense of personal integrity. A woman who doesn't need to prove herself to anyone because she knows her own worth. Now, is it possible to separate the art from the artist? Can we enjoy the work without considering the person behind it? I don't know. It's up to you to decide. But what I do know is that this perfume, like so many others, is more than just a scent. It's a story. A story of a woman who defied expectations, who refused to apologize for being herself. A woman who made the perfect entrance. There's this story about Coco Chanel and perfume that I love. Coco Chanel was born in 1883 and died in 1971. So she lived a very long life, a very public life. And throughout that long life, she was never photographed without her perfume. It was called No. 5. And the story goes that one day a journalist asked her, "Why do you always wear that white flower scent?" And Coco Chanel looked at him and said, "I don't. I only wear No. 5. And then the journalist realized that every woman around her, all the models, all the actresses, they all smelled like white flowers. And he thought to himself, How can I make sure that my own scent doesn't overpower hers? And so he began to develop a new fragrance for her. But the story has a twist. When Chanel first started wearing this perfume, it wasn't all that popular. In fact, people thought it smelled terrible. But she wore it anyway because she liked the way it made her feel. And as the years went by, the perfume became more and more popular until it was the most popular perfume in the world. Now, you might be thinking, what does this have to do with politics? Well, you see, back in the day, women couldn't vote. And so if you wanted to get out the word about something, you had to rely on men to do it for you. And who had more influence over men than beautiful women? That's who. And so for a woman to cultivate a certain smell, a certain taste, a certain style, it allowed her to put herself in a certain category that was refined, controlled, elevated above gossip. And believe me, when I say that this was not lost on Coco Chanel, she knew exactly what she was doing. You see, when Chanel first started wearing this perfume, it was very unpopular. But she wore it anyway because she liked the way it made her feel. And as the years went by, the perfume became more and more popular until it was the most popular perfume in the world. And so it was with everything that she did. She opened up a boutique in the south of France. People didn't like it. They thought it smelled terrible. But she wore it anyway because she liked the way it made her feel. And as the years went by, the boutique became more and more popular until it was the most popular place to shop in the world. So if you ever find yourself in a situation where you don't feel like you belong, or you don't feel like you're making a difference, just remember Coco Chanel and how she changed the world by simply being herself. The following story is an audio. Listen closely because some of the most important things in life can't be seen, but only smelled. There are anecdotes of her rooms filled with porcelain jars, bottles of essence, and powdered cosmetics, all carefully arranged. To enter her salon was to enter not only a chamber of conversation, but of scent. Visitors described the experience of being enveloped in fragrance, a quiet but unmistakable signal of refinement. Her name was Madame de Pompadour, and she was the mistress of King Louis XV of France. And although there were rumors that the king had been infatuated with her exquisite beauty, there was perhaps more to her allure than just what met the eye. Because while she might have been just a woman of the people who had clawed her way to the top by any means necessary, once she got there, she used every trick in the book to make sure that she stayed. One of those tricks was scent. See, when you walked into her apartment, you were greeted by the smell of orange blossom, a fragrance so heady and unique that it became synonymous with the woman herself. In fact, when she entered a room, people said you could smell her arrival before you could see her. That's how powerful a fragrance can be. And although we associate perfume today with the image of a woman, back then it was considered a unisex scent. Men wore it too. But that's not to say that women didn't use it to their advantage. There were courtesans and prostitutes who used scent to attract their marks. High society women used it to cover up the stench of stale waste that permeated through the streets of Paris, and even servants used it to mask the smells of their low-paying jobs. But none used it quite like Madame de Pompadour. See, she took scent to a whole new level. Not only did she make sure that she smelled delicious, she also made sure that everything around her smelled delicious too. Her rooms, her furniture, her clothes, even her stationery smelled of orange blossom. She dosed her linen, carpets, drapes, and upholstery with scent, and according to reports, even bathed in it. She developed a scent-making empire that produced soaps, scented oils, and wax candles to keep her kingdom of fragrance going. She set the trend of having one's portrait painted while wearing perfume, which is why many of the paintings of her have her with a scent bottle in hand. She was the first to popularize the practice of putting scent on one's handkerchief so that one could smell it during a long and boring meeting. She even released her own fragrance line, which included scents named after her favorite places. And although the business was run by her chemist, a man named Leblanc, who would later go on to start his own perfume company, the brand was synonymous with Madame de Pompadour. In fact, it was said that when Leblanc created a new fragrance, he would send it to her for approval before releasing it to the public. Now, there's no doubt that this was all very impressive, but many historians argue that what Madame de Pompadour really did was single-handedly launch the perfume industry in France. Before she came along, perfume was something that was reserved for the upper echelons of society, but she brought it to the masses. Her influence helped to create a market for perfume that had never existed before, And although she wasn't the first person to wear perfume, she was the first to make it a part of everyday life. Today, France is known as the birthplace of perfume, and it all started with a woman who knew the power of a good smell. Versailles, 1742. The Sun King's royal mistress, Madame de Pompadour, stands poised to enter the grand hall of mirrors. Her silk skirts rustle softly, a gentle whisper against the backdrop of flickering candlelight dancing on the polished marble floors. Her powdered hair, a masterpiece of lace and ribbons, shimmers like spun gold. As she moves, a faint trace of rose and jasmine follows. A delicate fragrance that mingles with the warm scents of candle wax, polished wood, and the distant aroma of gardens just beyond the windows. Her entrance, though, is more than a visual spectacle. It is a sensory experience. Those who behold her cannot help but be captivated by the ethereal aroma that clings to her skirts. A subtle, yet unforgettable signature. This is the essence of perfume, an olfactory masterpiece that can transport us to another time and place, evoke memories, stir emotions, and leave a lasting impression. But what was this enchanting fragrance that Madame de Pompadour wore? Unfortunately, the exact recipe of her perfume has been lost to time. However, we do have some clues. In the 18th century, perfume was a luxurious commodity, often associated with the nobility and the wealthy elite. The ingredients were typically imported from far-off lands, and the process of creating perfume was a highly skilled art form. Madame de Pompadour, known for her exquisite taste and refined elegance, would have undoubtedly chosen a perfume that reflected her status and personal style. One of the most popular scents during that era was a simple yet sophisticated bouquet, a harmonious blend of citrus, floral, and woody notes. The top notes, which evaporate quickly, might have consisted of sparkling lemon and orange, providing a burst of freshness and vitality. These notes would have been complemented by the floral heart of the perfume, perhaps featuring the delicate fragrance of roses and jasmine, echoing the blooms that adorned the gardens of Versailles. The base notes, which linger on the skin, might have included the warm embrace of vanilla and the sensual touch of musk, adding depth and sensuality to the composition. Another tantalizing possibility is that Madame de Pompadour wore a true Oriental fragrance. These perfumes were highly prized for their rich, exotic, and long-lasting qualities. Imagine the captivating aroma of amber and incense intertwining with the spicy notes of cinnamon and cloves. Perhaps a hint of oud, a woody, musky substance extracted from agar wood trees, added a touch of mystery and intrigue. Such a fragrance would have been a bold statement, transporting the wearer and those around her to far-off lands of the Orient. While we may never know the precise composition of the perfume worn by Madame de Pompadour, we can appreciate the artistry and symbolism behind this elusive scent. Perfume was more than just a fragrance. It was a reflection of one's social standing, personal style, and even power. For a woman who captivated the Sun King and graced the opulent halls of Versailles, her choice of perfume would have been a carefully considered accessory, enhancing her allure and leaving an unforgettable impression on the senses of all who encountered her. In the grand tapestry of history, where every thread tells a story, the legacy of Madame de Pompadour's perfume lingers like a phantom scent. A whisper of rose and jasmine, a touch of citrus, a hint of spice, all come together to create a sensory experience that transports us to a bygone era. As we lose ourselves in the labyrinthian halls of Versailles, we can almost hear the soft rustle of her silk skirts, catch a whiff of the delicate fragrance that once adorned the Sun King's mistress. In the absence of concrete records, our imagination takes flight, conjuring images of blooming rose gardens and sun-drenched citrus groves. Perhaps a dash of lemon zest and orange blossom danced with the headiness of jasmine and the sweetness of vanilla, all grounded by the enigmatic allure of musk or the warm embrace of amber. As we exit the hallowed halls, the scent of polished wood and flickering candle wax fades into the crisp air, leaving us with a lingering memory of an era gone by. And so the enigma of Madame de Pompadour's perfume persists, a testament to the ephemeral nature of scent and the indelible mark it leaves on our collective imagination. Just as her beauty and charm captivated the hearts of many, her fragrance continues to captivate our olfactory senses, reminding us of the enduring power of perfume to transport us to another time and place. And so the legend of Madame de Pompadour's perfume lives on, a captivating mystery that adds another layer of intrigue to the enigmatic figure who once ruled the hearts and minds of a nation. We don't know what smelled good in the 18th century. There are no perfume reviews from that era. What we do know is that the very rich enjoyed fragrances that smelled like flowers. And I mean really, really strong floral scents. See, the records give us fragments. We know that Louis XV's court was sometimes called la cour, the perfumed court. Every day, it is said, his rooms were refreshed with a new fragrance. Orange blossom on one morning, rose on the next, then violet, jasmine, or even lavender. The palace itself was a shifting sea of aromas designed to mask less pleasant realities and to overwhelm the senses with luxury. Historians tell us that Queen Marie Antoinette loved roses, not just the fragrant blooms, but the color red. She had red roses painted on her bedroom walls and her dressing table. Was said to be covered in the petals of a special variety of rose called a la reine for the queen. These were not simple blossoms, mind you, but a hybrid, carefully cultivated over many years to make them bigger and better than nature's own roses. But did she smell them this way? Would a bouquet of these specially bred flowers have smelled like heaven to an 18th century nose, or would they have seemed anemic and weak compared to their wild cousins? Today we associate roses with romance, but back then they were all about power and wealth. In a world where everyone smelled bad all the time, the ability to cover up was a sign of status. The more flowers you used, the more expensive your fragrance. And nothing says I'm rich like a field full of roses. It wasn't just the queen. Every noble lady at court was surrounded by flowers. They carried them in their laps as they sat for their portraits. They even slept on them. Floral waters and perfumes were considered healthy, even medicinal. And the air freshener of choice was a scented sachet made of linen or cotton, which could be hung in a room or tucked behind a picture to make it smell like heaven. Today we think of sachets as quaint little bundles of lavender that smell nice, but don't really do much else. But in the 18th century, they were like air fresheners on steroids. The queen's court was filled with the scent of orange blossom, rose, violet, jasmine, and lavender. That was the perfume. In the 18th century, a king's ransom was a bouquet of flowers. It might seem surprising today, but back then, flowers weren't just pretty to look at. They were powerful, they were expensive, and they smelled unbelievably good. Perfumes then were not quite like perfumes today. Many were heavier, made with animal-based fixatives such as musk, ambergris, or civet. These gave perfumes longevity, but also an intensity we might find overpowering. At Versailles, however, such scents were a mark of prestige. To carry them was to carry proof of wealth, influence, and access. Some perfumes were fleeting fashions. Court ladies were known to wear mixtures of violet and iris, fragrances that were delicate but required constant reapplication. Men often wore stronger blends with spices and resins. Perfume was not divided by gender in the way it is today. It was part of one's costume, layered like powder and silk. I am the author of a book about the history of perfume, and here I am at the Palace of Versailles to give you a glimpse into the fragrant past of this place. The Sun King, Louis XIV, liked his palace to smell like orange blossom. In fact, he mandated that all 18,000 employees of the royal court must wear it. But why? What was the point of this law? Let me tell you, there were no air fresheners or scented candles back then. People used perfume as their primary means of personal hygiene. It was a sign of cleanliness, and more importantly, a symbol of power. Many of the ingredients found in natural perfumes, such as musk, amber, and civet, are actually secretions from animals. Musk came from the musk deer. Ambergris was the waxy substance found in sperm whale vomit. Civet, well, that came from the secretion of the civet cat. These ingredients were costly to source, which is why only the wealthy could afford to use them. For commoners, a simple lavender scent was all they could hope for. In the royal courts of Europe, perfume was a sign of wealth and power. During the reign of Louis XIV, the most popular fragrance was called eau de denier, literally meaning old leather. Imagine the smell of saddle leather, old books, and pipe tobacco. That was the signature scent of the Sun King. He was so enamored with the smell that he ordered 240 bottles of it every single year. The French Revolution put an end to that. The revolutionaries were appalled by the extravagance of the royal court, and the Sun King's obsession with scent was seen as the epitome of aristocratic excess. After the revolution, perfume fell out of fashion. It wasn't until the 19th century that it made a comeback. Today, when we think of iconic perfumes, we often think of Chanel No. 5 or Dior's J'adore. But these are just two players in a much larger market. Last year, the global perfume industry was worth over $400 billion. So how did we get from that to this? Well, after the French Revolution, perfume making went through a quiet revolution of its own. Two scientists, Pierre Fitoussi and Paul Perfumery, created the first synthetic fragrance, l'huile de l'homme, usable. This meant that from then on, perfume makers could capture any scent they desired without having to rely on rare animal products or expensive ingredients. This opened up the world of perfumery to a whole new set of possibilities. At the same time, industrialization and new technology made perfume more accessible to the masses. What was once a luxury good became a commodity. By the 20th century, department stores were selling mass-produced perfumes at affordable prices. This is when perfume became a staple of everyday life. Today we have thousands of different perfumes to choose from, but how do we choose? One theory is that our favorite scents evoke memories. When we smell something, that scent goes directly to the part of the brain responsible for processing memories. This is why a particular perfume might remind us of a certain person, place, or time. But what did people in the 17th century smell like? If you were a man, you might have smelled like a mixture of citrus, flowers, and spices. Lavender, lemon, and orange blossom were popular notes to use in men's fragrances. These were meant to be uplifting and energizing. There was also a lot of vanilla, cinnamon, and cloves. These spices were not only aromatic, they were also seen as masculine and virile. Women's perfumes were often more floral. Rose, violet, and iris were all popular choices. These flowers were seen as feminine and delicate. They were also used to mask unpleasant odors. In the 17th century, women wore perfume to cover up the smell of stale urine. That's because urine was used as a cleaning agent. It was thrown on the floor to remove dirt and grime, so you can imagine that the ladies of the court needed a strong fragrance to combat those smells. In the 17th century, there was no such thing as air freshener. Perfumes were used to mask unpleasant odors. In the palaces of Versailles, they would often be mixed with vinegar and water and sprayed around the room. This was to kill the smell of stale waste and urine. Can you imagine the stench? Today, we have a dizzying array of scents to choose from. But in the 17th century, there were only a few ingredients available to perfume makers. They had to get creative with what they had, and they often came up with some interesting combinations. For example, one popular perfume was a mixture of lavender and patchouli. This was a very unusual combination, and it was said to be the favorite scent of the Sun King's mistress. Another popular perfume was a mixture of rose and pepper. This was a very spicy and sensual scent, and it was often worn by the ladies of the court. So what did people in the 17th century use perfume for? Well, they used it for everything. It was a way to cover up bad smells, but it was also a way to make a good impression. Back then, you were judged by your sense of smell. If you didn't smell good, you were seen as dirty and uncivilized. So wearing perfume was a way to show that you were well-groomed and respectable. It's hard for us to imagine today, but back in the 17th century, people would often go days without bathing. So you can see why perfume was so important. It was a way to stay fresh and clean without having to go through the arduous task of scrubbing your entire body with a low sponge. Perfume was also used as a form of seduction. In the 17th century, it was common for men and women to wear fragrances that were meant to attract the opposite sex. For example, one popular perfume for men was called l'huile de l'homme usable. This was a very musky and animalic scent, and it was said to be irresistible to women. And what did women use to seduce the men of the 17th century? Well, they often turned to the power of flowers. Fragrances like rose and violet were very popular among the ladies of the court, and they were seen as very feminine and alluring. As you can probably imagine, being a perfume maker in the 17th century was a very dangerous job. The ingredients that they worked with were very potent and often flammable, not to mention the fact that they had to deal with the volatile fumes of alcohol and other solvents. But despite the danger, perfume makers were highly sought after. Their skills were in high demand, and they were often employed by the richest and most influential people in society. So what did the king's perfumer do all day? Well, he had a variety of tasks. First and foremost, he was responsible for creating new and innovative fragrances. He had to come up with scents that were pleasing to the nose and memorable. The king's perfumer also had to maintain the quality of the ingredients that he used. This was not an easy task, as many of the ingredients were imported from other countries. Finally, the king's perfumer had to keep up with the latest trends in fashion. The Sun King was very particular about the way he smelled, and he expected his perfumer to keep up with his ever-changing tastes. So what did the king's perfumer wear? Well, he wore a lot of perfume. It was not uncommon for him to bathe in scented oils and powders. He also wore perfumes made with the finest ingredients, such as ambergris and civet. The king's perfumer was a very important member of the royal court, and he was expected to dress the part. He wore fine clothes and jewelry, and he was always careful to present himself well. Being the king's perfumer was a very prestigious position, but it was also a very difficult one. The perfumer had to be creative, diplomatic, and unflappable. He had to deal with the volatile nature of the ingredients that he worked with, and he had to keep up with the demands of the Sun King. Perfume has a long history, but for most of that history, perfume did not smell like perfume. In the 17th century, many perfumes were heavier than what we're used to today. They were made with animal-based fixatives such as musk, ambergris, or civet. These are substances secreted by animals, often as part of their sex pheromones. They give the perfume longevity, but also an intensity which we may find overpowering. Today, many of these animal-based ingredients are replaced with synthetic fixatives, which can achieve the same effect without the well-funk. But in a time before synthetics, these animal scents were the only way to make a perfume last. And so they were used liberally. At Versailles, however, such scents were a mark of prestige. To carry them was to carry proof of wealth, influence, and access. The king's mistress could afford to douse herself in the finest perfume. A simple country girl could not. So while the king and his courtiers might have smelled like a cross between a cat and a spice rack, at least they smelled like something. Many of the perfumes of the time were fleeting fashions. Court ladies were known to wear mixtures of violet and iris. Delicate fragrances which smelled lovely but required constant reapplication. Men often wore stronger blends, sometimes with cloves and cinnamon, but also with resins such as frankincense and myrrh, which smelled more like what we might imagine a medieval apothecary to smell like. The Sun King, Louis XIV, loved the smell of the sea. In fact, he even tried to bottle it. One of his perfumers created a perfume called Aqua Tofana, named after the island of Toga, which sits just off the French coast near the Strait of Dover. This perfume was said to be a hit. Unfortunately, the recipe was lost in the French Revolution, but the story stuck around. Legend has it that Napoleon's sister, Pauline, was so fond of this perfume that she requested it for her wedding day. It was said that the perfumery recreated the fragrance just for her. That is, if you believe this account from the Perfumery's house ad. Well, there's no accounting for taste, though I think I'd rather smell like the sea than like cat pee. Perfume was not divided by gender in the way it is today. Instead, it was part of one's costume, like powder and silk. Men and women alike would wear whatever was in fashion. It was until the late 19th century that men's fragrances really started to be marketed as men. Fragrances and women's fragrances became, well, more feminine. Colognes were popular in the 1800s, but they were not necessarily seen as something only men wore. In fact, Queen Victoria was fond of a cologne she dubbed the Sultan's Delight. The idea of a women's perfume came about when the Countess of Sforza commissioned a private perfumer to make her a special scent in 1853. This led to the creation of a brand now called Farina, which capitalized on the success of this first women's perfume by offering it to the Countess's friends. Soon, department store counters were offering perfume samples to anyone who walked by. By the end of the 19th century, there was a perfume boom. Manufacturers were experimenting with all sorts of new ingredients and fragrance families. By 1900, there were over 200 perfume manufacturers in France alone. Synthetic fixatives allowed for lighter, more subtle scents, which appealed to the modern sensibilities. Still, some perfumes which smelled like what we today might call distinctly masculine were created in this era. Today we think of the heavy, dark scents of the Middle Ages as smelling like patchouli, leather, and wood smoke. But at the time, these were considered distinctly feminine. It wasn't until the hippie era that patchouli moved from being a somewhat dirty, slightly sweet, leathery scent to the distinctly musky, woody, earthy scent we know today. Perfume tells us as much about the time it was created as it does about the people wearing it. When we smell a vintage perfume, we're smelling the past.
So, how do you think the perfume of Versailles smelled? Well, did Louis XIV make a good call when he tried to bottle the sea?
Do you ever wonder why your perfume loses its scent after a while? Fragrances have a limited lifespan. They eventually fade away like smoke. But there's another reason why some of them disappear altogether. It's because their recipe is lost forever. Time can erase a fragrance. The recipes written down in old ledgers sometimes list ingredients that no longer exist, or which cannot be used today. Plants once gathered in abundance may have gone extinct. Animal-based ingredients are restricted. And even when we know the formula, we cannot fully know the way it smelled, because distillation and extraction methods have changed. Modern perfumers sometimes attempt to reconstruct these scents. They pore over archives, letters, and trade records. They read of shipments of orange flower water sent to Versailles, or the popularity of violet sachets tucked into gowns. They compare notes with chemists and historians. Then, using modern tools, they attempt to bring these perfumes back to life, like this one. It was created by a famous perfumery house in 1862 for an empress. Its formula survives today, but many of its ingredients have vanished. First, the perfumers had to track down every last ingredient. Some were easy to find, like the essential oils of lavender and rose. Others proved more difficult. One example is this bluebell. It's a small wildflower that grows in Europe and Asia. For centuries, its nectar was used to make perfume and medicine. But by the 19th century, it had disappeared from much of its native range, thanks to overharvesting. Luckily, the perfumers found a patch of bluebells growing near Paris. They collected the flowers, used them to create a new batch of the Empress's fragrance. But not all lost perfumes are so lucky. Take this one, for example. It was popular in the Ottoman Empire in the 1700s. Its main ingredient was a spice made from the dried fruit of a rare tree. But today, the tree is extinct. No amount of searching could uncover any trace of it, so the perfumers had to improvise. They found a similar spice in Indonesia and used it instead. Sometimes the biggest obstacle is not the ingredients, but the process. Here's another fragrance that was popular in the 1800s. Its recipe calls for something called white musk. In those days, it was a popular ingredient in both perfume and soap. But what exactly is white musk? Well, it's not musk at all. The name is a little misleading. It refers to a synthetic compound called civetone. These days, it's usually made from the musk deer, an animal found in Asia. But back then, no one had invented artificial civetone. The perfumers had to find another solution. They decided to use castoreum, which is an extract from beaver glands. It has a similar smell to civetone, but it's much stronger. That meant the perfumers had to use less of it, which was lucky because castoreum is both expensive and rare. Despite these challenges, the perfumers managed to recreate the fragrance. They presented it to a group of experts. Most of them agreed that it smelled remarkably close to the original, but one expert disagreed. She thought it smelled more like a cheap imitation. Why was that? Well, it's because she had smelled the real thing before. She knew how it should smell. The others had no idea what it was supposed to smell like, so they couldn't tell the difference. Even if a fragrance can be recreated, it might not smell the same. That's because our sense of smell changes over time. Throughout history, people have been exposed to different smells. Some of them are pleasant, like freshly baked bread or a pine forest. Others are unpleasant, like sewage or rotting meat. Over time, we adapt to these smells. We get used to them. This means that a fragrance which once smelled amazing might seem boring today. Take this one, for example. It was created in the 1920s. At the time, it was considered to be very feminine. But today, it's seen as dated and old-fashioned. That's because our idea of what is feminine has changed. What was once considered feminine might now be seen as masculine or unisex. So when we try to recreate a lost fragrance, we have to be careful. We have to take into account the ingredients, the process, and even the audience. Despite the challenges, perfumers continue to try and recreate lost fragrances. They want to know what people smelled before. They also want to share that experience with others. After all, a fragrance is more than just a smell. It's a journey through time. Perfume is the most evocative of the senses. A whiff of something sweet and spicy when you're in a bad mood can turn you around. A splash of something fresh and clean can lift your spirits. A sniff of something woody and warm can put you at ease. Different fragrances affect us in different ways because each one tells a story. Some are personal to us, recalling a loved one or a special place. Others are historical, transporting us back to another time and another place. When it comes to this last category, few stories are as captivating as those of the French courts of the 18th century. Thanks to books, TV shows, and movies, we know a lot about the people who lived during this era. Louis XIV, Marie Antoinette, Napoleon. We also know a lot about what they wore, where they went, and what they did. But what we know less about is what they smelled like. In an exhibition currently on display in the Palace of Versailles, curators attempt to fill that gap. Sometimes they succeed, at least in part. Visitors to the exhibition may find themselves inhaling a scent described as Marie Antoinette's perfume, or the air of the perfumed court. Whether these are exact replicas is uncertain. They are, more often, interpretations. A careful guess, a whisper of something that might have once lingered in candlelit halls. Still, there is something haunting about the attempt. To breathe in such a reconstruction is to touch, for just a moment, a vanished world. Imagine walking into a recreated chamber of Versailles, the golden walls gleaming in candlelight, and finding that the air smells of roses, amber, and jasmine. It feels as though the courtiers have only just left, their perfumes still clinging to the air. That's the effect the curators of Versailles are hoping for. There are two main ways that they try to recreate scents from the past. The first is through written records. Stamp letters, diaries, and account books can tell us not only what ingredients were popular at a certain time, but also how they were used. One example is a recipe for a perfume called Eau de Cologne, found in a book belonging to the royal perfumer Jean Fodorier. The book dates from 1751, and the recipe calls for a mixture of essential oils, including lavender, rosemary, and citrus peel. Another example is an account from Marie Antoinette's court, which lists the ingredients for a perfume she likely wore. The list includes rose, violet, cinnamon, and cloves. These recipes and accounts are then used by expert perfumers to create modern versions of these historical scents. The second way that the curators recreate historical scents is through objects. If an item from the past still exists, perfumers can attempt to recreate the scent by analyzing its chemical composition. One example is a handkerchief said to have belonged to Marie Antoinette. A few drops of perfume were found on the handkerchief, and scientists were able to identify the chemicals that made it up. Using this information, they created a perfume called Le Parfum de la Reine, or the Queen's perfume. The exhibition features 7 scents in all, each one displayed in a room of its own. As visitors move from room to room, they are immersed in a variety of atmospheres. There's the library, with its scent of old books and pipe tobacco, meant to evoke the smell of a scholar's den. There's the bedroom, with its floral notes and powdery musk, meant to evoke the boudoir of a noblewoman. And there is the throne room, with its notes of myrrh and amber, meant to evoke the grandeur of the king's court. Now, not everyone will be transported by these scents. Some may find them cloying or artificial. But whether or not they succeed in their aim, the curators of Versailles have done something important. They have brought a new dimension to our understanding of the past. When we think of the French courts of the 18th century, we will no longer think only of powdered wigs and silk stockings. We'll also think of the perfumes that hung in the air, mingling with the scent of roses and amber, telling the story of a vanished world. There's a story in here that I can't tell you because it's lost forever. It's like a ghost story. It cannot capture the past completely. Fragrance is too fragile, too fleeting. But in the mystery of these lost perfumes, there is something compelling. They remind us that history is not only written in words or preserved in stone. It lingers in the air, invisible, ephemeral, waiting only for someone to breathe it in. Imagine the scent of lilies wafting through the streets of Paris in the 1800s. You could buy them fresh from the market and take them home to make perfume. Or you could just walk down the street and smell them in the air. Today we only have 2 choices. We can either buy a perfume that's been mass-produced and doesn't really smell like anything, or we can go to a small farm in France where a family has been growing lilies for 7 generations. They hand-pick the flowers at dawn, distill them immediately afterwards, and bottle the essence in small batches. Which one do you think smells better? Step into a gilded salon of 18th century Paris or Versailles, and you'll find perfume not simply stored in bottles, but woven into the entire rhythm of daily life. Among the elite, fragrance was a ceremony, a quiet performance that played out each afternoon as carefully as a minuet. Picture an aristocratic lady at her toilette. Her dressing table is a small theater of glass and porcelain, crystal vials filled with essences, tiny pots of pomade, sachets of violet powder, fans scented with orange blossom. Around her, servants move quietly, offering cloths, brushes, and the next vial in the sequence. This is the familiar image of 18th century perfumery, but it's one that has become somewhat disconnected from its original context. In an age when department stores sold scent by the vial and drugstores offered perfume as a gift with purchase, we've lost something of its former mystery. We think of perfume as something we spray on before a night out, or spritz into the air to mask unpleasant odors. But for the 18th century French aristocracy, perfume was a multifaceted experience, something that informed every aspect of their day. From the foods they ate, to the clothes they wore, to the very air they breathed. It was a sign of wealth and status, sure, but also an essential component of their identity. The French have long been synonymous with fragrance, but the origins of this olfactory culture can be traced back to antiquity. The earliest written record of perfume in France dates to the 6th century, when the Frankish king Clovis commissioned a balm scented with cinnamon, myrrh, and other spices to mask his chronic bad breath. A half-millennium later, during the 12th century reign of Louis VI, perfume arrived in France with the opening of the first pharmacy, or officina. In Paris, officina were early modern precursors to both the pharmacy and the perfume counter, where customers could buy medicinal unguents and aromatic substances from around the world. But it was under the Sun King Louis XIV that the French perfume industry truly took off. In 1672, he granted a noblewoman named Madame de Lafayette the monopoly on perfumery in Paris, and soon the streets were filled with perfume vendors carrying trays of scented water. By the middle of the century, the production of perfume had become a highly specialized profession. Perfumers apprenticed under master perfumers, learning the secrets of their trade, which remained largely a mystery to outsiders. Ingredients were dosed with precision, and each formula was jealously guarded. Some ingredients were imported from the East Indies and the Americas, like vanilla, tonka beans, and sassafras. Others were local, like the famed Roses of Grasse, a town in southeastern France that became the world capital of perfume. By the late 17th century, the French king was spending over 40,000 livres a year on perfume. Roughly $2.5 million today, he even established a royal perfume factory to supply his court. As the 18th century dawned, perfume had become an indispensable part of life at court. The Sun King's successor, Louis XV, inherited this passion for fragrance, as well as a slightly unfortunate genetic condition that made him exceptionally malodorous. Legend has it that Louis's mother, the infamous Madame de Montespan, dosed his bath with perfume to mask his beau. Whatever the truth of the story, by the mid-18th century, Louis was indeed bathing in fragrance both literally and figuratively. Every morning, the king's perfumer would arrive at his bedroom with a selection of scents. Together, they would decide which fragrances would accompany the king throughout the day. Then the king would step into his wood-paneled dressing room, a so-called cabinet de toilette, where servants dressed him with the utmost care. First, the perfumer would pour a small amount of essence into a glove-like perforated sachet called a bouquet de dames. These would be placed around the room, releasing their fragrance into the king's clothes and onto his skin. Meanwhile, other servants dabbed scented oils and creams onto the king's face and neck. Once dressed, the king would step out into the royal sitting room, where more bouquets de dames waited to perfume the air he breathed. Perfume wasn't just a sign of wealth and status, but also an essential component of identity. Fragrances were often named after prominent figures or places. One of the most popular men's fragrances was named after the infamous military leader, the Duke of Saxony. Ladies wore scents like Queen of Hungary, named for the 13th century queen who supposedly used it to seduce kings. And there was even a perfume called Versailles. From the throne room to the bedroom to the garden, the Sun King's domain was saturated with fragrance. For centuries, perfume was more than just a smell. It was a sign of power, wealth, and refinement. It was a symbol of the very essence of France. Ah, perfume. It's the ultimate luxury accessory, the coif to your Carrie Bradshaw, the IT bag to your Chanel suit, the perfect complement to your power red lipstick. But while today we spritz and mist our way through an entire collection in a single sitting, once upon a time, fragrance was reserved for the very special occasion. And when I say special, I mean bathed in scented waters. So before I tell you how 18th century aristocrats smelled, shall we take a moment to define our terms? What does bathe mean exactly? Well, in the 18th century, it doesn't necessarily mean submerging oneself in warm water, scrubbing with a rough loofah, and rinsing with freezing cold water from a shower head. Though I wish someone would do that for me right now. No, this was more of a spritz and a wipe kind of situation. They would start with a simple washcloth and some scented waters. This could be an infusion of rose, lavender, or bergamot. They would dab this onto their skin and then pat it dry. This is where the powder would come in. First, they would dust white powder, usually made of rice flour or ground almonds, all over their body. Then they would take a perfumed powder and focus it on their wrists, their neck, the tops of their thumbs. These were the pulse points of the day. And just like today, the idea was to enhance one's natural musk with these lightly scented offerings. The aristocracy took scent so seriously that even their wigs and coiffures were lightly scented. These were elaborate towers of curls and ribbons. They would be twisted together so tightly that they would release fragrance with every tilt of the head. Talk about olfactory art. They also used things like mats and cushions to hold their scent. These were placed strategically around their dressing rooms or bedroom, so that as they moved about, their favorite fragrance would waft and linger. Perfume itself was layered like garments. A base of musk or amber would be applied to the wrists and neck. Then a lighter floral water sprinkled over their gown. Sachets of dried herbs and petals were tucked into sleeves, corsets, and petticoats. Fans, gloves, and even snuff boxes were perfumed as well. The more one moved, the more the fragrance would escape. But why go to all this trouble? Why not just douse yourself in the strongest cologne you can find and call it a day? Well, because the purpose of perfume was not simply to smell nice. It was a signifier of wealth and status. Just think of the most expensive fragrance you've ever encountered. Now imagine the powdered wig and the silk stockings and the 8 servants required to dress you. That's the kind of money we're talking about here. In fact, at the height of the 18th century fashion, there were 14 steps involved in dressing a woman for a royal audience. And every single one of those steps required fragrance in one form or another. Not only did the perfume need to smell divine, it had to perform a certain way. There was a strict hierarchy of scents. The base notes were the foundation upon which the entire olfactory experience was built. Notes like patchouli, leather, vanilla, myrrh, and musk were considered rich and sensual. They were the backbone of the fragrance, and they projected an image of power and control. The middle notes were lighter and more delicate. Floral scents like rose, lavender, and violet were seen as feminine and elegant. They added a touch of sweetness and sophistication to the overall aroma. Finally, the top notes were the finishing touch, the exclamation point that made the fragrance unforgettable. Citrus. Herbs and spices were popular choices for top notes, as they created a refreshing and invigorating opening to the scent. So the next time you reach for your favorite fragrance, take a moment to appreciate the centuries-old tradition that it represents. From the days of Cleopatra to the present day, perfume has been more than just a way to smell good. It's a way to express oneself, to make a statement, and to leave a lasting impression on the world. The 18th century was a big, beautiful, smelly place. In the bustling cities and grand homes of Europe, there was a particular smell that floated through the air. Today we're going to find out what it smelled like to be rich in the 18th century. In the grand homes of the 18th century, furniture, too, became part of this scented world. Perfume fountains, delicate porcelain vessels, designed to hold and diffuse fragrance, were displayed in salons. Their presence was not merely decorative, but aromatic. The perfume fountain became a symbol of wealth and refinement. Its tinkling waters a constant reminder of the aromatic delights wafting through the room. In another corner might stand a potpourri jar, filled with a carefully chosen assortment of spices, dried flowers, and citrus peels. Its aroma, a rich tapestry of scents, would mingle with the perfume from the fountain and the incense burning in the hearth, creating an olfactory landscape that was both complex and inviting. The mere act of lifting the lid would release a burst of fragrance, announcing to all who entered that this was a space imbued with luxury and care. But it wasn't just about filling the rooms with pleasant smells. For the inhabitants of these grand homes, the furniture played a crucial role in their daily lives. The perfume, the potpourri, they were not merely decorative elements, but functional aspects of their environment. The perfume fountain, for instance, was often placed near a window or a source of natural heat. The gentle stream of water would evaporate, carrying the fragrance into the air and creating a subtle, continuous aroma. This ensured that when guests arrive, they were immediately enveloped in the essence of the room. Whether it be the fresh floral notes of a gardenia or the warm spice of cinnamon, the potpourri, too, had a practical purpose. Not only did it fill the room with a delightful fragrance, but it also served as a form of air freshener. In a time before modern conveniences, the disposal of waste was a challenge, and unpleasant odors were not uncommon. The potpourri, with its mix of fragrant ingredients, helped to counteract any unwelcome smells, keeping the air in the room fresh and inviting. And let's not forget the furniture itself. The ornate cabinets and chests that held these aromatic treasures were not just functional, they were also works of art. They were crafted from the finest woods and adorned with intricate carvings, their surfaces gleaming with wax or paint. They were as much a part of the room's decor as the scents they housed, creating a sense of unity and elegance. Imagine, if you will, a drawing room in full daylight. Sunlight streams through the windows, illuminating motes dancing in the air. On a table beside the window stands a porcelain perfume fountain, its delicate design echoing the floral patterns on the chintz curtains. The gentle gurgle of water fills the air, mingling with the soft light and the rustle of conversation. In this haven of tranquility, the scent of gardenias and cinnamon intertwine, creating an atmosphere of refined luxury. As the day progresses, the sun dips lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the room. The glow of candlelight replaces the brilliance of daylight, and in the fading light, the furniture takes on a new dimension. The perfume fountain, now bathed in candlelight, seems to glow from within, its porcelain surface reflecting the flickering flames. The potpourri, nestled in a dark corner, releases its fragrance more subtly, adding depth and complexity to the room's aroma. This is what it smelled like to be rich in the 18th century. A world where the senses were indulged and the air itself was perfumed. It was a time when the boundaries between art, scent, and luxury were beautifully blurred. Afternoons at court or in aristocratic parlors were thick with this atmosphere. Ladies would exchange notes on new fragrance blends, or trade sachets of violet and rose as tokens of friendship. Men, too, were expected to carry their own scents. Colognes laced with citrus or spices, applied to lace cuffs or handkerchiefs. To sit together over tea or chocolate was also to mingle perfumes, a subtle symphony rising around the conversation. It is difficult, from our modern vantage point, to imagine the sheer density of these aromas. A single salon might combine the rose water of one lady, the jasmine cologne of another, the ambergris favored by a gentleman, the lavender sachets tucked into gowns, the smoke of perfumed candles, and the musk of powdered wigs. It was a fragrance not of one note but of many, a tapestry of scent, stitched into the fabric of elite life. Gentlemen and women of the 18th century weren't just wearing perfume, they were dousing themselves in it. This was the age of the handkerchief, not just for dabbing at the eyes, but for mopping the entire body. Rich folks would have a set of scented handkerchiefs for this purpose. They were made of linen or cotton, sometimes silk, and they smelled like whatever perfume the owner favored. These fragrant squares were used for everything from wiping the hands after a meal to cleaning up after a trip to the privy. Sometimes ladies would give them to servants as gifts, or to visiting dignitaries as a souvenir. The French king's mistress, Madame de Montespan, even had her own perfume, which she called a gift from the king, and sold the recipe so that commoners could buy it and smell like royalty. Perfume was also commonly applied to lace cuffs, a practice that gave rise to the expression to be in the perfume of the person, meaning to be in the good graces of the powerful. Someone was allowed to smell your perfume, they were allowed very close to you. Only the very elite could afford to bathe daily. So perfume was essential to covering up any, shall we say, aromatic emissions. Courtiers were known to bathe up to 4 times a day, and when they emerged from the bath, they would cover themselves in scented oils and powders, before dressing in fresh linens. Sometimes a lady would choose a different perfume for each day of the week, or to mark special occasions. Queen Marie Antoinette, who loved all things excess, reportedly bathed every morning in milk and honey before dousing herself in perfume. The 18th century was the golden age of perfume, just as Louis XIV of France was known for his Sun King persona. So was his court known for its love of fragrance. There were hundreds of perfume shops in Paris alone, catering to the scent-obsessed aristocracy. But what did all this perfume smell like? While tastes varied widely, there were certain notes that were popular among the elite. Floral scents like rose and violet were commonly found in perfumes designed for women, while men tended to prefer citrus or spice-based fragrances. Musk, amber, and civet were popular base notes for both. Civet is an animal musk, derived from the secretion of a cat-like animal called a civet. Ambergris comes from the sperm whale and was highly prized for its ability to enhance other scents. It's a strong, musky note that adds depth and warmth to a fragrance. Perfumes were made by mixing essential oils with alcohol and water. The alcohol evaporates over time, leaving behind the scent of the essential oils. Sometimes the base note would be added last, creating a deeper, richer fragrance. Perfumes were often named after mythological figures like the Greek goddess of love, Aphrodite, or famous beauties like the Italian opera singer Faustina Bordoni. Some were named for places like the Persian market or the Turkish bath. Others were inspired by flowers like the rose or the violet. One of the most popular perfumes of the time was called Eau de Denier, or Old Leather, a spicy, woody fragrance that was said to drive women wild. But not everyone could afford expensive perfumes. Working-class folks relied on simpler scents like lavender and chamomile to mask their odors. For many people, fragrance was a luxury reserved for special occasions. But for the elite, it was a way of life. From the time they woke up until the time they went to bed, they were surrounded by the smells of roses, amber, and spice. Thank you for watching.